Welcome to Branding Brews, a podcast focused on branding, marketing, and design for the beer industry. This podcast is a side project of craftbrewcreative.com. My name is Ryan. I'm a graphic designer who helps breweries of all shapes and sizes with strengthening their brands. This is the first episode of Branding Brews. My hope is that this podcast will bring valuable information and insight to brewery owners, marketers, sales folks, branding folks, graphic designers, and anyone working in or interested in this great industry. Today we welcome Ryan Sanders to talk about crowdfunding a beer project. How's it going, Ryan?
Going great. How are you doing, Ryan?
Doing pretty good, man. Yeah. So tell us a little bit about yourself.
Oh, sure. Well, I am also a designer, although I tend to be more of a web designer in trade. But so I'm a designer as well as a home brewer, and just kind of have this little habit of trying to launch businesses all the time. So that's how I kind of got involved in this whole industry on the business side of it.
Nice. Yeah. Ryan and I went to school together. Besides sharing the same name, we also shared some fun times in school.
Yeah, officially the best name, I feel like. Now confirmed on the podcast here.
Yes, exactly. There's no shortage of people named Ryan.
Oh, yeah, I know. It's our age group. It's every other kid was named Ryan.
Yeah. Cool. So talking about crowdfunding, you started a business doing homebrew kits and homebrew supplies, and that led to a project that you were going to get crowdfunded called Kit Lab. So what was Kit Lab, and how did that come to be?
Sure, yeah. So Kit Lab was meant to be a kind of like a little bit like a social network for brewers, but what I think the real power of it is that brewers could go on, post recipes that they'd been spending a bunch of time developing. A lot of brewers go through 10, 20 iterations of a recipe before they really kind of consider it done. And so it would allow a brewer to post, create an account, post a recipe online, just like they're doing today, but with the kind of added benefit of then they could actually start to sell them as prepackaged brewing kit. Brewers all over the world purchase quickly from other brewers. So it was a little bit of like a peer-to-peer sales network in a way. The service that Kit Lab was providing would be the framework to upload and sell the recipe, and we'd also take care of the fulfillment as well. So it was really like low effort for both the selling brewer and the purchasing brewer to kind of like spread recipes, try recipes, and it was really kind of born out of just that, what I find to be a very frustrating process of kind of trolling brewing forums for you can go for hours and hours on those things. And then when you finally land on, this recipe sounds good, it's for me anyways, it's kind of annoying to then try to get all of your specialty ingredients. Maybe my brew shop has it. Maybe I got to order from Northern Brewer. It's just kind of like going through the process of getting it all in the same place at the same time. It just was, I didn't like that piece of it. And I just kind of had this like, I wish I could just go somewhere, look at recipes, and when I found one, kind of hit the go button on it. I want to brew this one, and just have it all kind of come to me.
Yeah. So I guess some of like the kind of social, or I guess kind of people could create profiles and allow people to kind of check out their different brew recipes, and then as a user you could also then say, hey, that's an awesome recipe, and click to order the ingredients, and then if I'm correct, then you would fulfill that, right, and then send it to them.
Yeah, totally. And you know what? I kind of glossed over like the big benefit for the brewers too. It was a revenue sharing platform. So, yeah. So not only are you selling your recipes, but you're actually like getting kickbacks from it. So I hoped to kind of create a passive income source for these brewers. They put so much time into their craft that it would be cool if you could make a little side business out of like all this time you're spending on crafting these great recipes. And not only that, but you could kind of create a forum where brewers could become known. Wow, this person sells a ton or is really highly rated, and just all this kind of like sharing of information to build a market and build kind of a platform for brewers to become recognized at the home brew level, without having to like start a brewery and really kind of take that huge leap into going into business for themselves.
Yeah, awesome. Yeah, I thought it was a great idea. We'll get into this. Unfortunately, it didn't get off the ground. But,
Totally. I thought it was a great idea too.
Yeah, for anyone out there taking a look into this, unfortunately, it didn't become a reality. But that's part of the whole Kickstarter and crowdfunding thing. Not everything is gonna catch fire. Not everything is gonna get off the ground.
Totally.
Yeah. So, did you consider other methods of funding, and like what led you to Kickstarter for funding of your idea?
Yeah, definitely looked at other funding methods, most traditional methods, I'd say, the kind of typical bank loan, the family loan, kind of looked into what it would take to really kind of get VC type action on that. And there was funding is kind of twofold. One, you just need the cash to do the thing, right? So that's kind of a really easy problem to understand. But I think what really led me to Kickstarter was actually the chance to fail early, which, as we just, perfect segue, I did fail. But I'm so happy I failed before I owed somebody $100,000, right?
Yeah, that's big.
Yeah, totally. And it's actually like a huge principle in design as well. And so I'm so happy that I kind of had that in the back of my head, is like, if it's going to fail, I'd like to fail right at the beginning instead of midway through. And so that's, beyond just getting money from a crowdfunding platform, what you get is market validation. And you get this kind of like, okay, I think this idea is cool. Does anybody else think it's cool enough to actually put up money? And that's a huge indicator. Like, the reason my project failed is because, quite honestly, people didn't want it. And that's like, I'm so happy that I know that now.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, there could be all sorts of factors that go into something like that, but I mean, I guess that is a great aspect of the crowdfunding is it could be something that proves whether it's a good idea or not, and so, yeah.
Yeah. To be honest, I actually planned to fail on the first Kickstarter. I kind of went into it saying like, this will not get funded, but I'm going to use this first round to figure out why the first version of this idea is not ready for market, and then I will respond with a second Kickstarter. So yeah, I really kind of went into it with eyes open on that. It's actually a pretty high percentage of first Kickstarters that don't get funded. But it's the people who are serious really kind of go into it with that outlook and just say, hey, I'm gonna take a first stab at this, and I know I'm wrong right now, and that's okay. But I'm gonna go into it ready to learn. And I just had some employment opportunities pop up at the exact same time as the Kickstarter. I think on day 2 of my campaign, I started a new job, and so just kind of life changed right at that moment for me, to the point where I felt like, well, I don't have time to run the second campaign. So yeah, I think things would have progressed further had not other factors been at play.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah. So what did you find that you needed to create a successful Kickstarter project and Kickstarter profile?
Oh, I think that, there's a lot of great reading on this, first of all. So I feel like I'm just kind of stealing other people's ideas
Yeah.
to answer this question. But yeah, I mean, you need to look super pro on Kickstarter, right? So you can't half-ass it. You have to have a video for it. You just kind of have to attain a certain amount of polish for everything. So even down to little stuff, like it seems like all successful Kickstarters have those little, inline graphics in their post. It can't just be a block of text. It has to look like something that people can kind of browse through and consume. And so there's a big part of that, like it has to be well designed. But on the other hand, it has to be well planned out too. You have to really show people that you have a vision for what the initial project looks like, but then what are the following iterations? When do those iterations happen? To a certain extent, you'll want for yourself a business plan. I don't know that you necessarily always need to surface the business plan to your donors, but just going through the process of making a business plan certainly makes you so much more of an expert on the thing you're trying to sell. So having that in place is huge. And yeah, then the normal stuff like donation levels. There again, there's so much riding on what the perfect donation levels are. There's so much out there to read. But yeah, sooner or later you just gotta kind of draw the lines and say, okay, these are going to be the donation levels. You can add more as you go, and it's again, you're kind of on your first one, you're looking to get your feet wet and learn more than nail it.
Yeah, that makes sense, and that's actually a good tip. I mean, you can always kind of adjust things as you go along, so that's helpful.
Totally.
Yeah, and yeah, I mean, having a good at least a good idea of what your business is going to be. Like you said, you don't maybe need to have a full-on business plan, but I think that if you can show possible donors out there that you're a professional, you've thought this through, and that kind of also proves that that this is a viable project. Like once you get, if they fund this and it gets going, they're going to get something out of it, and that you're going to be able to deliver that to them. So.
Yeah, and it's like anything on the internet. If you got to Kickstarter in the first few years, it actually kind of didn't matter. You could kind of whatever you could get up there really had some impact. But nowadays you have major corporations doing Kickstarters, so you have to kind of play on that level of kind of production and polish now. Or there are too many other good looking, well thought out projects now where you have to raise your game and compete at that level.
Yeah. Well, and I was going to mention also there are a lot of other crowdfunding platforms, and now there are specific ones just for the beer industry, which is pretty cool. Yeah. But did you find, and it probably even more so now, but being on the Kickstarter platform itself, it's pretty competitive, I would think. I mean, there's so much other stuff going on that platform.
It is. I suppose the real answer is it's so competitive that you get very little organic traffic from it or organic donations from it. Like you're saying, it's just kind of, there are thousands of projects on there, so you end up finding that most of your traffic and most of your donations actually come from your external marketing efforts and your personal contact list. It's got to be like 5% or less is just from people stumbling upon your project on Kickstarter. It gives you a platform, but it doesn't really generate the money itself.
Yeah. So yeah, then part of the whole crowdfunding thing is, for your business is finding out what your funding needs to be or what your funding goal would be. So what did you take into consideration, like around setting your project funding goal?
Yeah, that was a difficult one for me as well, and I'm sure that's like the $1 million question for a lot of people. Here again, it kind of go back to the design principles that we just happen to be steeped in here, but really it's pretty important to define what we would call in design your MVP, your minimum viable product or project here. But really kind of figure out like what is the least amount of effort or the least amount of money I need to really take that first step on the road towards future kind of grand scale project. So I bet that I didn't do a great job on that. I think the funding goal for KitLab was, I can just look right here. It was about 45,000, and the reason it was so high is because I was talking about, creating a fulfillment facility from scratch. I had been selling out of my garage for the better part of the year before that. Now it was completely unsustainable. And to do anything on the scale that I was talking about, there needed to be kind of a warehouse. So we were looking at building a warehouse and and stocking a warehouse and all these kind of just like real world components that are kind of hard to be scrappy about. had I done the second Kickstarter, I bet you that I could have brought that ceiling down a lot. I couldn't even tell you how I would do it at this point, but there had to be a way, maybe partnering with like a Northern brewer or something, maybe partnering with somebody who already had the fulfillment down, and just kind of becoming an affiliate for them or something. There could have been ways to do it that would have been less expensive, and future iterations, I think, would have borne that out.
Yeah, I mean, I guess that can relate to like to a brewery as well. I mean, you maybe don't shoot for the stars, for your initial crowdfunding. Just maybe what are the very basics you need just to get off the ground, and that way your goal could be more attainable.
Right, totally, yeah. And with starting a brewery, that those systems come in so many sizes. I feel like I hear a lot of people talk about, well, I got to start at got to start at a 30 barrel system or something. And I never really quite buy it. It feels like you could start at a 30 gallon system, and as demand increases, just keep adding pieces. The breweries and brewing systems are so modular and like Legos. It's pretty easy to build upon a solid foundation.
Yeah. So talking about building a professional crowdfunding profile, you were fortunate enough to have a graphic design background, so you were able to create like a professional, I guess, brand, I would say, and just a beautiful profile on Kickstarter. Did you have any tips for folks out there that need professional branding created? And I would imagine that a lot of people out there don't have that benefit, or they might be kind of bootstrapped on budget and funding in order to create that professional look. Did you have any tips there for people that might be in that situation?
Yeah, totally. That was a bit of an unfair advantage that I had. And by the way, that's a great way to go into business, is figure out what your unfair advantage is and exploit that. There's a lot of resources out on the internet for kind of, especially like logo creation and that kind of stuff. I personally kind of stay away from the logo auction sites. There's a lot of those that are, you kind of run timed contests, and you get questionable levels of work out of it. If there is some budget for kind of this identity creation, I would look to first I would look to just my own network of friends, right? It feels like it's a big enough profession now that if you don't directly have a friend who's a designer, you probably have a friend of a friend who's a designer. The more you can work in person with someone, the better that product will be, I should say, the happier you'll be with the product at the end of it, because you'll be more involved with it. If you have to go to the internet and to a stranger for design work, there are freelance sites. I think freelancer.com is one that I've actually hired off of a few times.
Nice.
Yeah, and it's kind of like, it's a kind of a shopping experience. You go shopping for a designer, and you can check out what they've done in the past, and even industries they've worked in the past. And so I think that you can find some really fair hourly rates on there from like real people who do real work. So I think that Freelancer, and there are some other competitor sites, maybe even Elance or something like that. Yeah. Those type of sites I think are pretty legit, and you can get real work out of real people pretty quickly.
Yeah, and I've besides being a designer myself, I've also hired designers to do work, and it could be a bit of a daunting task, and if you're going to be spending any real budget on it, you really want to do your homework, make sure you review their portfolio, and that you like their design style, that you think it would be a good fit. And also, if you're going to be working with them more in the future, then it's really valuable to actually talk to them and make sure that you have a good working relationship, and that you get together, get along well. That can go a long way, especially if you plan on working with them more in the future. So.
Yeah, and even on this, what seems like a real small little, just I just need a logo thing, prep yourself and prep them. Like, you want to be very involved in that, and even if it's just like, I want a bunch of check-ins, I want a bunch of feedback rounds on whatever small thing we're working on. It's always a recipe for disaster to just kind of give a designer 2 sentences about what you want and then don't talk for a month. It never goes well.
Yeah, the investment up front of having it planned out, as many details as you can have for the designer is going to just get you off on a better foot. I definitely can't understate like how important that is to have a really good foundation for them to get started on.
Absolutely. Yeah. Designers really crave direction. It's, it's not the case that they want to just be given a task and just disappear for a while. They want to have you involved, or any good designer should want that. So maybe that's a way to screen people out too. It's just kind of ask, hey, how involved am I in this process?
Yeah, exactly. That's a good point. Yeah. So I guess on that same topic, you had a really great video introduction, and you filmed that yourself.
Yes.
And I know that's a really important aspect of a crowdfunding profile, just because it can seeing somebody's face kind of can give you a kind of connection to that person, and it's just a visual, easy way for people to kind of digest what you are, who you are, what you're about. So do you have any tips for folks on shooting their own video? Like any kind of DIY stuff if they don't have any photo or video experience?
Sure, yeah. Yeah, and so this is like one of those, going back to that earlier question, this is one of those like must-haves. At this point, you really can't have a Kickstarter or any crowdfunding project without a video. It's, again, just kind of expected at this point, but also, like you had mentioned, it gives your donors a sense of who you are. And, half of the pitch you're making to people is, don't I have a good idea? And the other half is, don't I seem like a person who can fulfill that idea? So the video is the selling of yourself. People, you need the video to be able to kind of say, look, I'm a real human being, and I seem like I'm going to get this done. So it's huge to do a video, and in any way you can, that'll help. I think that the big, again, I guess I'm going to be saying this a lot. There's a ton of reading out there to be done on how to create the perfect crowdfunding video, but the big takeaways are just kind of the big DIY stuff as far as like get the technicality of it all is lighting is huge, and even if you just kind of get some like floor lamps together and just kind of make sure the space that you're filming in is really well lit, makes a huge difference. One piece that seems less than obvious but is actually huge is the sound of the video as well. I had a little what's called a lavalier mic. It's a little clip-on mic that I just had on my shirt. And so if you have the ability to, say, connect the microphone to your camera, always take that opportunity. Sound makes a huge difference in making it look like an iPhone video or a professional video. I don't have much experience in video either, to be honest. I just happen to have a DSLR camera, just a Nikon D90, and it was like their first model that did video. So great, I'll shoot it with that. And so I just kind of put it on a tripod and locked myself in my garage. And
Nice.
I'd hit record on the camera and then run over to the chair and and it only records for 5 minutes at a time. So every 5 minutes I'd have to get up and run back over.
Well,
It was the
yeah,
worst.
That's kind of the scrappy, kind of upstart thing. I mean, sometimes you have to work with your limitations and, just work around those. So
Totally, yeah. And so what did I do? Oh, yeah. So another big thing that I felt like was really important is I staged the stuff behind me. I was sitting in my garage, but I kind of like made sure that the entire frame looked, had the kind of the theme of what I was talking about. There was brewing stuff behind me, and I shot some little extra footage of myself kind of crushing grain, and just kind of like just made a little attempt to make it interesting. one site I wanted to point out, this is so awesome that services like this exist, but there's a site called borrowlenses.com. If you don't have XYZ, lights, mics, camera, whatever, Borrow Lenses allows you to just rent, like you could rent a DSLR for the weekend. And it's, maybe $80 or something. And
Wow.
all weekend long to just kind of play with and see what you can get out of a setup like that. It's pretty cheap to get into. Trying to think of any other bits that were. Oh, well, then there's the kind of the software side of things, like where I'm on a Mac, so I think I just used what was it, iMovie? Yeah, I think I edited that thing in iMovie, and that comes with Macs. I know Adobe makes Adobe Premiere, and you can get a free 30-day trial from adobe.com on that. There's I'm sure a ton of editing software out there, but I think just the basic theme on all of this stuff is figure out how much value you can create with the least amount of effort and the least amount of money. And so free trials are your friends. These rental services are killer if you don't have the gear. And I think that, yeah, just some setting aside some time to experiment, you'll actually be pretty impressed with what you can come up with.
Yeah, I think that was a great tip. I mean, staging your background and what's going to be in the video, that's a very, you want to look professional. You don't want to have, say like your kid's stroller in the background or something like that. So being aware of that kind of thing could make you look more professional. And as borrowlenses.com, that sounds like a really great resource. And I'll add those to the show notes. Be adding as many of these little details you provided as I can. So if you come to the website, then you can just click on the show notes links and take you to that information. Yeah, so tell us a bit about, I thought you did some pretty great marketing research and marketing for your Kickstarter. Can you give us a little idea of what avenues you went down for that, and your experience in that in general, like getting published in media and getting your word out like that?
Sure, yeah. So it was a big process of, I think that's the marketing and the outreach is like, I think probably the most effort to any crowdfunding campaign. It was I started on it probably six months before I launched the Kickstarter, and because my limitation that I was aware of is I'm only one person, and I only have so much time, and so I started real early, starting to build up social network, build up kind of email lists of people I was going to target, and just kind of really let it slow burn for a while and find these people that I was going to be pitching later on, and setting up a lot of kind of, I guess, automation. And that's something maybe we can talk about a little later, but you really got to kind of, like, for me, again, it's just me. So I had to really lean on technology to do a lot of repetitive tasks for me in bizarre and interesting ways to get to pretend like I was, I had the ability of even 2 or 3 people. So I guess step one was really kind of just start building up social media presence and building an email list, and like a site that is like unreplaceable for what I was trying to do was pressrush.com. And it turns out there's actually a lot of competitors to it now, but I really enjoyed the experience on PressRush. First of all, again, the cheap and scrappy version here is you can get a free trial to PressRush, and what they offer is you can search. Basically, again, you go shopping for people. You can search members of the press by publications they write for, topics they write about. And so you go in there, you create a paid account or a free account or whatever, and you start searching for, like in my case, I'm searching for members of the press who write about startups and beer, or breweries, and just all the topics that you feel like, when people are writing news stories, they would be interested in my topic. And man, I probably scraped 5,000 emails from
Wow.
From that site, and just like, okay, here are 5,000 members of the press who potentially would be, they're scored to say, well, they might actually be interested. Um, and so I used that. I used that email list. I took that to Mailchimp.com. Again, free account. You can send, I don't know, 10,000 emails a month for free or something. Dumped the huge email list into there, and when it was time, when the Kickstarter launched, I had 5,000 members of the press to talk to about it, and the responses on it were hilarious. Get ready for rejection.
Yeah.
Get ready for mass rejection, but it's worth it because maybe, I don't know, probably 2 to 3% of them said, oh, that actually sounds very interesting. Yes, I would like to talk further and write about it. So, if you're working with a big enough list, maybe 10 to 20 press people actually engaged with me, but that's huge. I mean, what else did I have? I'm just some guy.
Yeah.
And so let's see, let me take a look. So it looks like, I got some really bizarrely large coverage. So Food and Wine, Time Magazine, Slate. I got a feature in PC, and okay, wait. This is making me sound better than I am. All of these all of these print magazines operate online publishing stuff as well. So sorry, Food and Wine. I was not in the paper magazine. I was on their website. Yeah.
Well, and these online publications a lot of time are kind of, they're pretty hungry for content. So if you write something that's decently appealing, then they're looking for stuff to publish. So
yeah, totally. And it the once you hook somebody, then it really makes a big difference to go and tell them, hey, here's some samples of what other people have written. Once that starts going, here's some sample copy. Here's media ready images. I just had a zip file basically that I'd send to people and say, hey, I know that you get pitched all day long. And if you're interested, I'll make this real easy for you. Here's some stuff. You can kind of rearrange it into a story, write a few words of your own, and ship it out the door. So trying to be kind of cognizant of what their day is like, and really just kind of be honest about, if you're interested, I'll make this easy for you.
yeah, that's great. I mean, I've worked in publishing stuff before in the past, and that's a great tip because these people are busy. They're getting pitched a lot, so having everything possible that you can have ready as possible, including images that they can just post to, along with the article, having things written up to where they can, nearly literally just copy and paste it. Having that can be really helpful for you to get actually published.
Totally, yeah. Yeah, so then once you got, if you were to follow this exact system, then once you started getting those kind of, say Food and Wine and Time, then you can go to, what's neat about the brewing magazines is they're brewers, and brewers tend to be a really strong online community. So it's actually really easy to find just on the websites themselves, here's the head editor of BYO magazine, and you can just email them, and it's not they're not trying to hide from you or anything. So once you can email BYO and say, hey, Food and Time wrote an article, Food and Wine wrote an article, and going to be on Fox News next week, and suddenly then you seem like a real thing. And we were in BYO as well as I think Zimmergy as well. Is that how you say that magazine?
That's a great question. I don't know.
I'm probably saying it wrong.
Yeah. But that's a great tip, though. I mean, because once you do get published at a couple spots, then having that kind of proof that you've been published before, that they were like, oh, maybe that's a good idea. These guys are legit, or maybe they have something here. So
yeah,
that's kind of some proof for future people that you send it to, that maybe they want to publish it.
Right. Well, and it really helps with that kind of cold call emailing stuff, right? Because again, like you said, they get pitched so often every day. If you show up and say, hey, I've got all these media assets for you, and these other guys have kind of already vetted me and they decided I was worth their time, it really gets you in a lot of doors once you have the first few.
Yeah. Yeah. And so you were also on a podcast as well. So, I mean, that seems like that's a pretty good way to get some stuff out too. How did that go? Did you reach out to a lot of podcasts, and did you get to see any like positive feedback or traffic once you did that beer podcast?
I did reach out to a few podcasts, and so it was actually a very similar experience to trying to speak to print media. A lot of them were just like, "Hey, we get pitched all day," and especially crowdfunding campaigns are a big thing that people are always pitching us. So, not interested. But then, yeah, I did have a few hits on that as well, and I saw little bumps from those shows. I think really any press you can get for a crowdfunding is great, and that, especially the podcast, is kind of a fun, longer format conversation where you have a chance to really lay out the plan and kind of talk about where you came from, where you're going. So it's a great piece to have in general. I'm not sure. Yeah, I don't know. I think that the podcast I did land, listenership was probably pretty low. So I didn't get any huge exposure out of it, but it was definitely it created a media piece that now it's like people could, if they're interested in the project, they can go and listen to 25 minutes on more about this project. So even if it didn't generate a ton of traffic, it was a great piece to have on the campaign page.
Yeah.
So heck, I mean, it would be good to even, create an audio. I mean, why even ask somebody to be on their podcast? All it is a recorded phone call, right? Just call somebody and talk. Call somebody and record it, and there, you're on a podcast, and now you've got an asset for your page.
Yeah, just give it a name, and then that's another proof that you're legit.
Totally.
Yeah.
No, I didn't even think of that.
Oh man, we could have done this a while back for you.
No, seriously. Where were you? I needed you.
Oh, yeah. Sorry. well, here I am. Yes. Just a bit too late though.
That's right. Yeah, we'll talk about lessons.
Yeah, exactly.
Another big piece of the marketing machine is really figuring out. My Kickstarter was a community project at its root, so it made sense for me to really go get the community going ahead of time. So I kind of evangelized my user base and tried to find my super fans, right? And so if you donated to this thing, you were just kind of like self-identifying as a super fan for it. And so it ended up being that most of the donations were brewers who were interested in participating in the platform. And so having a plan early on for how you're going to involve your community, but also turn them into your evangelists for your product is pretty big. So the people who donated were going to be my super users, and so I often ask them to reach out to their social networks and say, hey, I'm becoming part of this thing. We're launching this as a group, and really kind of speak about your project in the broader kind of community effort. That went a really long way.
Yeah, and I guess for a brewery, being a part of a community is a huge thing. With how competitive things are these days, it's not always that you can just open a brewery and succeed. But I think what makes a brewery more successful is being a part of the community. And I guess for you kind of had a product where, if we want to talk about like a brewery, maybe you go with your network of people. And I guess if you talk about home brewing and stuff, then you could get your beer out to people and maybe even have like tasting parties. People can try your beer and then see what you're all about, and but yeah, trying to extend that out as much as you can. Mm-hmm. And then because these people that are going to be donating and backing you, like you said, it's going to be a community. The whole thing with crowdfunding is sometimes they feel like they're a part of something, and so if you can get those people in any way you can. To know about you, or if you're brewing, to know about your beer and your vision, then they're going to feel like a part of you. They're going to feel like a part of the project, and they'd be much more likely to actually donate and back you. Yeah.
I almost feel like a Kickstarter or a crowdfunding campaign that has more of a kind of location associated to it, I feel like it'd almost be easier to pull off than let's organize everybody on the internet to get behind this thing. Like, you have a physical community. You're going to build your brewery somewhere, so go into that community and, like you're saying, have these tasting events. And fine, it's a tasting event, but there are also computers there ready to accept donations, right? And just say, hey, this is what we're making. This is what it tastes like. This is where we're going to build it. And would you like some ownership in this service we're bringing to the community? And beyond that, it's like, okay, breweries can offer all sorts of community-based engagement, brew on premises type setups where one day a month the top donors come in and actually get to brew with you. There's such a thing as a co-op brewery where you actually pay to be a member, and same kind of deal. You get discounted pricing, but you're also invited to do the brew process weekly. There's a lot of ways to kind of actually make it a community project.
Yeah. I actually teach beer branding and design, and some different aspects of how to market yourself. And being a co-op is one of the things I mentioned, where people own a part of the brewery, and they can create definitely a sense of community because people are actually involved. And in regards to marketing your brewery, this goes along, I think, right along with marketing your crowdfunding campaign, in the sense that, obviously you want to save money. You're probably going to be bootstrapped, and getting out into your community, talking to people, it's going to take time, but that doesn't mean necessarily that it's going to be an investment in money. So right. Getting out in your community, talking to people, getting a part of any organizations out there that you can, it's just a way for you to spread the word about what you got going on, and that could come back to your crowdfunding campaign. And if things are successful, then you've kind of already started the groundwork for people to walk into your door and try your beer once you open.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And
if your crowdfunding doesn't work out, you also have connections now to maybe where you do more a traditional investment type scenario. Now you know people, and they want you to succeed, and it opens up other avenues for financing.
Yes, I think a good lesson there is that really it's never too early to start building that network and start telling people what you're about, because like you said, even if your campaign doesn't work out, then you still have this network, and if you're really passionate about it, chances are you're not going to just give up at that point. Unless you've, like you talked about earlier, if it's something that kind of got validated that it's not going to work, then maybe you don't. But I imagine if you're a brewery and you're trying to get going, that just because a crowdfunding campaign didn't work doesn't mean that you're just going to give up, and you might find other ways of getting funded. So having that network is super, super key.
Yeah, totally. And again, to reiterate, if it's validated that specific version of the idea isn't exactly what the community is interested in, time to pivot. You don't need to give up. You just need to figure out, okay, what's not resonating about this exact configuration? What can we do to make it more appealing to the people we're speaking to?
Yeah, just kind of retool a little bit and come back with something that might be successful.
Yeah, try it again. And it's like, what happens if you fail? Nothing. There's no downside to it, right? Fail 10 times, who cares? Like, eventually, through all those failures, you will learn some sort of winning combination.
Exactly. It's kind of a learning process.
Yeah.
So I guess about the whole kind of thing of failing, I guess, was there any unexpected things that came along that kind of took you by surprise, that if you were to do it again, you would have taken a factor for the next time?
Oh man.
Was there, a Kickstarter specifically, but other crowdfunding platforms might have like specific rules or procedures, or like maybe there's some unexpected costs, or maybe it took a lot more time than you expected, or anything like that.
It took way more daily effort than I ever expected. And I did so much homework on what it was going to be like, in my 30 days of campaign. And it still kind of just hit me like a truck. You want to just be like so on point for 30 days straight. And it's exhausting.
Yeah.
And you got to be there every second of the day to respond to, like we were kind of mentioning with the building that momentum of marketing, where it's like, okay, well, the second you have two people who have published articles, now you need to start re-engaging with everybody and saying, look, we got these two articles, who's next? And it's really like as much lining up of stuff as you can do beforehand. That 30 days is just always a huge push that I feel like you're never going to be quite realistically prepared for. You can just prepare for or expect the unexpected, I suppose, there. I think, yeah, I think for me, for my specific project, my biggest like next time would have been more about kind of retooling the idea itself. And I think too, in a perfect world, I would have just, sat in front of a computer for 30 days and really kind of managed it more and been more present in it. But I just don't know, you only have a certain amount of time in the day.
Yeah. I think people may not know that you have to be committed to your backers, and because they're investing in this, and you need to be able to communicate with them and let them know how things are going. Because if you kind of just go absent, then people might be like, okay, yeah, I'm putting money into this, and these guys are just not around, or so I think keeping people updated,
right,
really kind of keeps them engaged, and lets them know that you're into this thing.
Right. Yeah. And your backers too, they need to be made aware when an article came out. Like that really helps them feel like they made the right choice in you, that other people are validating that decision. I think that some great resources are out there for if people are planning on to do crowdfunding stuff. There are a lot of podcasts completely dedicated to kind of interviews like this about, people whose campaigns were huge successes, but also whose campaigns were, pretty giant failures and what they learned from that. So two that I was listening to a lot were Funding the Dream and the Kickcast. Got a lot of great ideas and processes out of those two. Also, Kickstarter themselves has what they call the Creator's Guide, and that gives you a lot of the kind of like just the basic, like you got to have these things or else, don't bother.
Yeah.
Automation, there are a lot of automation tools that we haven't really dug deep in, but things like ifttt.com. I think that's it.
Stands for if this, then that.
Yes, if this, then that. So that helps you really automate across a lot of different platforms. My big platform was Instagram. So I would basically only do stuff on Instagram, but I'd use if this, then that to then take the Instagram content and push it to all these other social platforms. So it looked like I was active on Twitter, Facebook, Blogger, all these different places, but I was really just logging into Instagram every day. There's a great app on, and I bet you this exists for PCs too, but there's a great app on Mac called Flirt. F-L-I-R-T, and it's a way to kind of find new interested people on Facebook, where you can go and kind of, I guess it's like a friend auto adder or something, but basically you can set up messaging and just kind of go out to your friends of friends and say, hey, you look like you'd be interested in this project I've got going on, like, come check it out. And so it kind of goes out and finds, expands your social network on Facebook. Yeah, just tools like that, where it kind of you can put in some effort up front and then really kind of expand your reach through automation. Really are huge when it's just you doing it.
Yeah, there's a lot of great tools, and I guess that's kind of another case for trying to do some homework beforehand, try to get things set up well. Because using these kind of tools can help spread the word, can make save some time on your end, because you can do something once and have some automation features that will take care of a lot of the other legwork for you.
Yeah, and just the big takeaway there is don't try to do it in your 30 days while you're running your campaign. Have it set up beforehand. The only thing you want to do in the 30 days is communicate constantly and just kind of try to build that momentum as quick as you can.
Yeah, definitely. Well, great. I think that's a good spot to wrap up. I think some of the takeaways is to try to have a professional looking profile, and really plan out a lot beforehand. Start building a network, see if there's any, build a list of resources that you could try to get your marketing out to as far as getting published on media. Take some time to see if you can create a really nice video, and yeah, I mean, just try to have as professional of a appearance, professional messaging, and just for that time that your project is live, then just be really attentive and communicate with your donors, and that's kind of a time that you're just gonna have to buckle down and just be attentive. So
yeah, and that's the time to have all of your in-person events, and yeah, I mean, just really get in front of your people.
Yeah, definitely. Awesome. Well, that will be it for the first episode of Branding Brews, and please give us a rating in iTunes. That's going to really help us out and get this out in front of some more people. And appreciate your time today, Ryan. It was a pleasure speaking with you.
Yeah, man, thanks for having me on. It was fun to walk through it again.
Absolutely, yeah. It was. I think you did a really great job. It was a bummer it didn't get off the ground, but yeah, thanks for chatting with us.
Yeah, no problem, man.